Um, this is our last seminar of the semester, so it's nice to have you guys with us and whoever's watching on the live stream. And keep an eye out in our newsletter and on our news on the website for the new seminars coming up in September. If you haven't been here before to ITRL, just a couple of safety things. The nearest fire exit is the door that you came in through, or if you walk down the stairs all the way to the end of the corridor and right, there's a green sign for another fire exit there. And if you need to use the toilet, it's down the spiral staircase there, and there's a door on your right hand side.
But we don't expect any fire.
We don't expect any fire alarm or any fire, no. Yes, so today we have Rami from ITRL, and he's going to be talking a little bit about disruptive innovations and business models, and offering us some valuable insights. So we're looking forward to it, and I'll leave you over to Rami. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming. I think in these times we're hearing a lot about business models and disruptive innovations. I think when you hear a lot about business models, but this is my own interpretation, it seems that there might be some disruptive innovations happening because everybody is rethinking the ways they are doing their business. So I will try to tell you a little bit about myself through the projects that I have worked with. So first, I started working with business models with the stop inductive electric charging bus in Södertälje in 2016. It was a multiple actor project, and we worked with the business models with most of the actors that were working in the project, and then went from the electrification to a self-driving vehicle bus project where I coordinated the project. It looked at the social aspects of the automation, how people are perceiving the automation, and how they are, their willingness to pay and willingness to use. Today, we're working with the Control Tower project. I'm coordinating the project. We have Johan from Carmenta who's working with us, and this is Frank, who's sitting over there. So these projects gave me the insight on, or like kind of inspiration into working with disruptive innovation and business models, both in research and in my work. So I think as a start, it's good to see like where we're standing. I think Sweden is fortunate with a lot of industrial success. These are examples of the companies that have stayed for some time, doing great things, incrementally and radically sometimes. And they managed to be success not only in Sweden but also worldwide. However, this is not a guarantee. This is very important. Sometimes even when you're doing what you think the right things, you might fail and you might be out of the market. And these are two examples that I will speak a little bit about later that did a lot, and they are a mark of success, but they were out of the market. So the questions that we'll try to look into today are more, what is the nature of this challenge that is facing the industrial actors today, and what to do about it. So, please interact, stop me, and try to give your insights, so like from your industries or from your experiences, because this will make it also more valuable. So, first of all, the transport is it has its specific nature. I mean, when you look at transport, it has all of those different regimes. The word regime is used because it has each of the transport modes, or like modals as they have been perceived, is kind of constitutes a regime. So there is a bus regime, car regime, logistics regimes, and those regimes are interacting with each other. Those have been built over a long period of time, solving different kind of problems until they reached the state of stability that we're having today. It has a lot of products and services and technologies that are empowering those transport systems that we are having. And those stable solutions are built on what can be called in the management literature dominant designs. Those dominant designs achieved a high level of performance and also high level of interdependencies and interconnectivity to services, and also they met different demands and varying demands of the people. And this is sort of what gives this flavor to the transport, other than the different industries. We're not talking about Google, because mostly when you hear most of the business models talks, you hear most about Google, you hear about different things. So it's important to address what is different here. Some of the things, I mean, you hear many times, yeah, the business model canvas. Let's have a canvas and try and start drawing our business models. In my research and in my work, I found this a bit simplistic. It does not address many of the complexities that are surrounding us. So it's important when we are addressing our industry to understand the context and to understand where we are, to know what we can do and what we can't do. So out of this transport systems comes those new technological paradigms. So the new technologies that we are seeing today, they are sort of a function of different elements. One of them is the regulations. So the regulations that we're having today, and this also connects to the transport system nature. So the 2030 goal in Sweden, or 2045, I guess, in Spain, banning diesel cars, those manifest sort of like a landscape pressure. These landscape pressures are coming to us in the form of a regulation eventually that is responding to an environmental and social needs. And those social needs or threats could be also manifest as threats. They are one element that gives a seed to the new technologies. The other one is unsolved problems. There are many of unsolved problems where you can find them both in the markets, the products, the services, the entrepreneurial. You know someone who's entrepreneurial by those who found those unsolved problems. And then the established technologies. This is also a very important point. Many people who come up with new ideas, new technologies, new innovations, they are the ones who understand very well where we are today, what kind of technologies we have, what kind of functionalities they provide, what kind of performances. So those three together, they produce like sort of a force creating this potential inevitable transitions. So the questions are to which directions. This is always the question of like calibrating where is the new shift gonna happen in okay, automation, but where in automation? What exactly, what kind of products? Is there going to be a remote operation or not? What kind of charging we will have? Is it gonna be inductive or conductive? Is it gonna be during stop or dynamic? These are the questions that are sometimes difficult to understand in the beginning, but it requires this kind of like hybrid knowledge, and this makes the complexity within transport. For example, in other industries, the regulations have less impact on the path ahead, but the unsolved problem, also the technologies. I mean, for example, you can think about hotel industry. I mean, hotel industry is not characterized by high complexity of technology, and it has different paths and different ways to think about it. So again, looking at this picture again, now you can see where this is happening, like the function of the regulation, the pressure coming from the landscape, from the authorities, and the new technologies that are being injected in pilots. These are characterizing like small protected spaces in order to foresee what is the future. Most of the pilots, usually they test the technologies only, but I think it is a mistake to overlook the business models. We have conducted this action here, but in many of other pilots that are not only this picture all around, you would see that the business model aspect is overlooked. Eventually, you might have a great technology, but you will find out that it's not gonna take off. And it's no wonder, most of technologies die. So then, this comes to the question of innovation. I would like to ask you a quick question. What is the difference? Who can tell the difference between innovation and invention? Can someone give it a try? Eric?
I'd say that invention isn't necessarily used by anyone. You can invent something by yourself, but it's not an innovation is something that actually reaches not necessarily broad mass, but at least other people.
Okay, that's very close.
No,
Yeah,
I would
please.
say the same. I mean, it goes, or in business terms, it goes somehow to the market.
Exactly.
It's all the way. But
Yes.
It's what it
Yes.
is.
There is sometimes a mischaracterization of innovation that it might not be new, or it is new. But the main difference is commercialization. Whenever there is commercialization, reaching a mass market. So it actually, like Eric, you touched on like one stage, but it should reach a big market in order to be called an innovation. And this is the difficult act. This is the process where it brings the innovation. So it's new combinations of products and services and resources and equipment and other factors that you bring them together. So, for example, Steve Jobs is the man who was known for innovation because he brought, or he managed to bring his products to the market in big scale. And I put this picture actually because the innovation is usually, it's not only the force that creates and makes big like products big, and it also the same force that destroys the organization. So it makes you or breaks you. So you need to understand this current that is happening behind you. I see it as a pattern that is moving in the background. So those who understand the technologies pretty well in the markets are the ones who can catch up and have some predictions. Or, okay, this is how it might look like. And the pilots are a great avenue to think about those innovations. And this is where many people make their careers on top of that. So disruptive innovation, like to be more specific, I think Clayton Christensen is the guru of the innovation, the coined the theory of disruptive innovation. He's like differentiating between sustaining and disruptive innovations. So the sustaining innovation is actually those innovations that make your current product better. So it's the fifth razor in a blade, for example. It's the next feature in the engine that makes it quicker. While the disruptive is actually a new product that it's actually worse. It starts worse than the current technologies. So this is something that characterizes the disruptive. It does not catch up with the performance first. And this is where it starts. It's in the low end and in the new markets. So it catches up on new footholds that are sort of untouched or like undervalued customers. Those who are not considered well by, like think today if you're Ericsson, Scania, Volvo, and then those markets adjacent to you that you're not touching. You're how to put it, like the customers that are not most important to you, if you want to put it that way. This could be a potential for disruptive innovation. However, the technologies here in this aspect, they take up this role for some time. Low performance, they do not catch up with the standards, but when they catch up with the standards, then your mainstream customers say, goodbye, we're going for your competitor, or the competitor that you didn't know. So there is some sort of stealth aspect to it. A disruptive innovation happens with with someone who you're not usually characterizing as a competitor. So, and I think digitalization is kind of enabling a lot of disruption in different aspects. It's connecting industries, it's opening doors between the different ecosystems, not only companies. So this is a classic example. Xerox, for example, were on the high of the market on printing, and it was disrupted by cheaper printing companies. I guess it was Ricoh and Canon. Yes. Kodak actually developed, an engineer in Kodak developed the technology that disrupted their film technology. So they had one of their engineers develop the digital technology, made the digital camera, the management were not super impressed with the prototype. And it's not impressive. I mean, this is how it started. It's not impressive. You hear a lot about that Kodak did not catch up. They did not know about it. They were not aware, but they were actually aware. I think they knew. If you like track the story in a proper way, you know that they knew that it's happening, but they could not do anything at some point because they had like a separate department that was working on digital technology. But the problem was that later on the smartphones came in and they threw them out of the industry. They could not do anything at some point. So they could not catch up with the pace. Another example from the literature is the disruption that happens in auto industry. So Toyota, for example, they came in after the World War I. They came up with like Japanese capital and started with cheaper cars. Actually, with the three-wheelers, I guess. They started with cheap three-wheelers to solve the problem of the transport for people in Japan. It was like rice farming and they came to solve, to tackle this kind of unsolved problem. But then later on they came up to tackle this unsolved problem in the beginning, and then they went to the United States. So they disrupted, I guess it was Ford and the big auto industry giants in the States. The car was a bit luxurious. It was more on the high end, and they brought a car that is like, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000. And then they catch up with college students. I lived in the States, and you find now that having a car is not a big deal. It's not expensive, and Toyota were one of the early actors who managed to do that. So they disrupted a new market, and this is like the unmet need in a new market with those low-end customers, if you want to put it that way. They were not. I think Ford and other actors were not thinking about them as a potential main revenue stream. Then the other one is Honda. I think it's also very, very interesting. Honda came up with a motto of like, you find nice people on a Honda. It was actually trying to depict, to change the image of who's on a Harley Davidson. So they disrupted actually Harley Davidson. They tried to catch up to this. So it's like a sort of a social image disruption. They changed the view of the product, and they met this kind of new need for the people. So these are two ways to think about how also disruption can happen. This is also from Clayton Christensen's stories on disruption. It's about Asus and Dell. So Asus is a supplier of Dell. They came up to them with an offer. It's like, I think they started with the motherboard. They told Dell, I mean, you're making those laptops. Why would you need to make your circuit boards? We make them for you. You will have lower assets. It will be good on your financial numbers. You don't have to worry about it, and it's not your core competence. Dell, of course, they made the right decision and they went for it. This has happened again with a new transaction when they asked them to do the assembly of the computers. So Asus told them, we do the assembly for you. And then, of course, better numbers, seeking profit, being rational and trying to seek your profits and do what you have to do. And then it continued with the product design, the supply chain, and it ended up with a computer that has this label, but all made by Asus. Of course, there you have great numbers, great return on assets, because technically you don't have any assets now. Somebody else took them. So watch out of like those short-term, and it's not that they made the wrong decisions. It's wrong to put it that way. I think it was just this balance between long-term and short-term was the most difficult thing to make. And they did not foresee where this is going at some point. So I think this figure explains a bit how this process happens and how those dominant design occur. This is by Abernathy and Clark, classic in managing innovation. So technically there is a lot of variation. You can think of those variations in the beginning with like having a lot of different ways and techniques to charge or those different discussions in the industry on automation, and then becomes like sort of a selection and retention. Here, then you have like, this is the process of creating this dominant design. There is a big war of standards. My guess and estimation, we are standing here in this period of technological discontinuity today when it comes to automation, to electrification, and there is a lot of those like disruption of the dominant designs that we have today. For example, having the chauffeur in the bus, or electric, or for example, how we're charging our vehicles, the new concepts of mobility. So this is one way to look at the how it looks today. So what kind of implications these kind of periods have on the innovative incumbents, on the companies that are trying to take innovations but they have a big history of product success? There is, of course, internal tensions, and power struggles. I think in your organizations, or if you are working with large organizations, you will have those conflicts between, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to invest in this new technology that does not have a high performance, or this combustion engine that made us a fortune? So this is classic. There is a big competition on the resources, and because we have limited resources and we have to make decision, and it's about where to go for the future. So then this feeds to, this struggle is on this balance actually between balancing the short term and the long term, and this is a delicate matter. I think it takes people with special qualities in order to understand this balance, because if you cannot leave your short term and just jump to the long term quickly, it is a really delicate process. So those who are managing innovation within the organization need to have both vision and also not forgetting what we have achieved today. And it takes a lot of nuances. There's a lot of nuances into what is creating our success today, and what is the success gonna be, or how it looks like tomorrow. When to leave the ship, when to leave what we're having today. The third one, I think, competencies. Many of the organizations today, they will see that they have a problem, especially if you're a technologically intensive company. Business competence becomes a problem within this period. It's hard to find people who have the right business competence coupled with technology. You usually have either or. And also, like, you can think of, like, if you're an operator and you have like 90% of your assets or 90% of your people are the chauffeurs, how is that going to be in the future? If you're having your people in Scania, in Volvo, who are working with a combustion engine today, thousands of people, what kind of competencies you need for an electrified vehicle in the future? So this is a big problem within this period. And this all feeds to the tendency to be defensive. You will have people who have stayed in the organization for 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know. And then they would defend what worked. And they have a right. I think they have a good role in trying to protect, but not too much. This is the problem. This is when it comes to this period. And then you have sort of a business model lock-in, which I found in my thesis as well. You find yourself that you invested a lot sometime, and there are some rooms for movement that are not available, not as easy to switch as you think. You know what to do. It's like Kodak. You know what to do, but you can't do anything. So this is why the tips will come later. So I just should not spoil it. So this points usually characterize what kind of implications have on the organization. So what is this lock-in and inertia? It's the lock-in that happens, or the tendency to be defensive. It's a process that is a bit random as well. I mean, it's hard to know how it starts or where it starts, but there is a lot of like self-reinforcing that is happening within the organization that puts you in a position where you are locked. And this lock-in is not always bad. The lock-in is usually good for stability. So you need to stabilize in some situations. Otherwise, how will the platforms speak to each other without stability? The stability is also in standards. And this is built in the engineers' minds and in the routines. This is usually stories, myths. In the organization, you hear people speaking in the coffee machines about it, actually. You found like, but this made us. These are the things that it could be also in the infrastructure, in the procedures and techniques that are in the organizations. The lock-in is benign, okay, and healthy. In not usually it's benign, but when the world is shifting, it's lethal. This lock-in becomes, and I think this is what most of the organizations today need to look at, especially if you're a large technological organization. Yes, you can see this chain that explains this this lock-in. So what's the way out? Business model innovation, and I think this is the difficult part, and this is the part that takes a lot of nuanced work on each industry, on each ecosystem, what to innovate and with whom, and what kind of industry to open up to, what kind of partner to link to. These are two examples of the success. But before, the business model is sort of, it connects to the DNA of the company, what you're made of. How are you creating this value, and with whom, and how are you recapturing it? And this kind of logic is connected to technically 3 or 4 processes, and these processes need to be harmonized. So let's say the business model today that you have, it have a harmonized process. Someone comes and say, let's have a new technology. You put it, you inject it in this business model, but then something doesn't work. So it's like a machine. Everything needs to harmonize. Your revenue model, the way you are creating the value, as well as the value proposition. Many people come up with new and innovative and beautiful ideas and value propositions, but do they work? This is the main question. It takes a lot of analysis. So Netflix is one of the prominent examples that made business innovation sort of like a hallmark of what they do. Netflix started with the rental, video rentals, and they disrupted that market. But then they did not wait, they disrupted themselves. So they found that the broadband technology is picking up. So they thought, why not just stream our videos? And so they did not wait for the industry. They had a lot of agility and flexibility and understanding and awareness of how things are going within the market and what is close to them, what is happening in the near waters. The second example is Amazon. Amazon is started with used books. They used this reverse auction business model where you have one buyer and multiple sellers, and then afterwards they opened up, okay, why not other products, not only books, so they could utilize the same platform for different things. And then later on they sell the books, and they created a product. Usually people move from product to service, but this is another example of moving from service to product. So they lock in more people to them. So these are just a little inspiration on what kind of how business model innovation happens. So tips, as I promised in my description. So externally, I would say watch for your suppliers. These are potential disruptors. This dynamic of what happens between the company and its suppliers and what is offered to you, what seems to be attractive, might be detrimental to your future. Think of the example of Asus and Dell. Someone is giving you an offer that makes your profits be better, but is actually eating your future. The second one, third one, I think it's the tech and lobbying. This is why, especially within transport, you need to be out trying to understand all of those pilots, try to see where are those new technologies and are happening, and lobby. There is a war of standards that is happening usually within this disruption time or the technological shifts. And those who usually make the first step make a lot of winning, and they create the path that everybody will be dependent on. And then sacrifice and position. This is connected to watching your suppliers, try to keep what you think is strategic, even if it's profitable to let it out. So keep on your positioning. It becomes very important. The second one is internally, balancing the innovation stream. It is technically something like jiggling balls. I mean, eventually working with buses, trucks, thinking about the new technologies and the current technologies. It's a quality that is very, very difficult, that takes managers of innovations who can think on their feet, who can manage different things, that require different mental sets, mental attitudes, and trying to align those into, like, because you need to decentralize. I mean, going to this periods, you need to provide some agility, like creating those innovation small organizations that are taking care of those innovations to build the agility. However, you need to keep, this is where you keep the focus and control. It's the financial and social. So you need to put all of the organization into one vision, but different people are doing different things that might be contradicting. You might see people fighting on the table, but that's normal. This is like a hallmark of this period. And yes, of course, alignment of the multiple structures and cultures, because the people who are working with the innovations are more entrepreneurial, and usually this, I think everybody sort of know it in the industry, is to separate those who are working with entrepreneurial mentality from those who are working with incremental mentality, those who are making the engine better from those who are working with the servitization of transport or on-demand mobility. The third one is hiring the right competencies. This is the main challenge, because usually those who hire the entrepreneurs are the ones who are looking from the past. So those who want the engine to be better are the ones who are hiring the new entrepreneurial minds. So it becomes sort of a contradiction. So business competence is very, very important, but merged with technological knowledge. To build a force that can tackle this challenge. So this is the main message, because this was one of the problems, I guess, with Kodak that could not make it, is that they did not have enough mass of people who could interpret and shift the organization into where it should go. So the takeaways: think your bets with your external technological forces. Innovation is about decision making is about innovation. So whenever you're making a decision, this decision might make it a bit more difficult to be in the future, to be a winner in the future, or a bit more likely to win. So this does not happen without the syncing with what's happening around, being around in the different pilots, looking at the new technologies. This second one, I think every organization needs to measure their agility. You need to know how flexible you are. You need to develop sort of some KPIs to know how quick you are in shifting to new trends when needed. And third, of course, business model innovation. I guess this should be separate, like, of course, connected, but like a separate task that should be worked on within the organization. And finally, even your best product, your best service, your best strategy might be doomed to fail. I mean, this is how the nature of the market forces and the industry. So looking at the future with the eyes of the past is problematic. You need to have look at the future with fresh eyes, but position yourself as well. Do not lose your current advantages. And yes, then you will pass behind this and not rock it. So thank you very much. This was my presentation today.
Thank you very much, Rami. Very interesting. Okay, now we have a little bit of time for questions. So does anybody have questions?
Yes.
You mentioned in the end that you should have some like KPIs for change or ability to change.
For agility, yes, and flexibility of the organization.
What could those KPIs look like?
I did not think about it actually, but I would say this was something that came up with me as I was working on my research. But I would guess, usually, if you're thinking about how many people do you have that are working on entrepreneurial ideas, on new innovations, to the mass that is working with the current products and services, this could give you a hint. But then this might not be the most accurate, I would say. It might take a little more work to develop this kit. It might be a good project as well. So, but yes, this is just a hint.
And you started with describing.
Can you please just tell us a bit? Yes.
Okay. Sorry. My name is Joachim Scherwall, Research and Innovation at Traton, or formerly Volkswagen Truck and Bus, sitting in Södertälje. You started with describing the transport system evolving over many years, certain logics, and it's extremely complex in many ways. And I mean, having spent many years in the telecom industry, where you had a lot of technology shifts and new innovation technology, but still the ability, let's say, to build, let's say, new networks or greenfield and things. I mean, what I find fascinating now in the transport industry is that you have this combination of extremely disruptive technologies and, you could say, a very complex transport system.
Yes.
That has evolved over many years and is not run by one operator, but
Yes.
billions who
Yes.
are all operators and are optimizing from different.
Yes.
That tension.
Mm?
I mean, and business models. You know, I mean, it's you can do a fantastic business model, but the technology is not there.
Yes.
Or the other way around. Technology enables a lot of fantastic things,
Yes.
but the system or us as consumers are not
Yes.
there. I mean, that's why it's so difficult, I think, to
Yes.
judge how far
Exactly.
it will go in different areas.
You also have to take into account the infrastructures. The infrastructure is sort of like it carries those logics that the industry is having. So the complexity that you're speaking about, this is the interesting time that we're having today. So okay, we invested in the biodiesel or biogas for infrastructure for some time. So what do we do today? Do we shift everything? Do we make who's going to pay for that? These are the complex questions. So there is like this sort of state of constant negotiations between the technology providers, the new disruptors, if you want to put it that way. But my estimation, but this is my own estimation, is that large industrial organizations within transport, they have time to shift their R&Ds. And many of the actors or the new technologies might kind of like merge in the regime. So because there is a bit of time. My estimate that the shock that is happening to transport is not abrupt, and the technologies, they are working good, but the maturity level is not reached to be commercial on many aspects. So this is why I think, for example, the new technologies with automation, electrification, and those everything connected to IoT and digitalizations are merging with what we're having today. And you might see different functions, but the actors might survive. And this is my estimation.
And compared to other, let's say, digital disruptions that we've seen, this then, to follow your thought, will become, let's say, technology shift or disruptions a little bit in a slow motion.
Yes.
And that is quite tricky, because to shift an organization and really move, then you need some sort of sense of urgency.
Yes.
So the internal tension
Exactly.
goes very slowly.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a new, I would say, a new challenge where all these
Yes.
Clayton Christensen's doesn't really work.
Yes. And this is why I thought that, for example, depends on the competencies that you have. If you have the people who understand this slow motion technological forces that are happening around, they will keep reminding. If they are empowered and in the right positions, then you will have the agility that I spoke about, or starting to move this ship.
Or we get back to sleep again.
Or we get back to sleep again. It's yes, because it's sometimes that you do everything you can, but there's also a lot of other factors that needs to be taken into account.
One one thing that I was reflecting on is what happens when there are extremely dominant actors or actors that don't operate in the free market in the same way. Like, for example, SL, UL, BL, these regional transport operators. So even though there may be an innovation that makes sense and that perhaps should be adopted, because it's tendered, because it's dominated by individual companies, and because this is decided by the government, there isn't the space for a small disruptive company to come in. Can you mention something about
Yes.
that context?
That's an interesting point. I think like the transport authorities, they are more into the what I mentioned is as the regulators. So they are kind of like the ones who are filtering down or operationalizing the government goals, or they are sort of the pressure that is happening on the private industrial actors. I mean, SL is not running for profit. SL is running to do zero, right? If I understand well. I mean, they are not here for profit. They are to watch some other kind of value. But their role, I think, this is what I mentioned with tech and lobbying. It's a lot of negotiations. So if you're Carmenta, Johan left. If you're a new company that is working with a new technology, then it's your duty to kind of like communicate what is working and what is not working. And on the long term, when there is like enough mass, then usually there is like this kind of interplay of the regulations responding to those new technologies, new needs. So I see this as sort of an interaction. But I would not put them more into the category of an incumbent who's trying to innovate a business model. They are the ones who are trying to make sure that what we are doing like aligns with the societal needs or aligns with the goals, like higher goals. More questions?
No? Okay, then we don't have any questions on the live stream, do we? Okay, then we'll stop here, but a couple of things. If you haven't ticked your name off on the form, please do so before you leave. And if your name isn't on the list, please write it down in your organisation as well and give it a tick. Yeah, if you haven't already got something to eat, there are plenty of sandwiches, so please grab something to eat. So now we're all going to stay for a while and just mingle a little bit and have a chat. But thank you for coming, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.